Hello, thank you everyone for joining, and welcome to the latest installment of our webinar series looking at how to safely speak up for Palestine. My name is Shahan. I volunteer for the BIMA Support Clinic, and I am your host again today. Today, we are grateful to be joined by midwife Fatimah Mohamied, who will share her story on how she has had to battle repeated referrals to her regulator, the NMC, and also even a terrorism referral. She will also summarize her current case that she has brought forward and what support she requires. We're also joined today by Saira Hassan, BIMA Support Clinic coordinator, who will detail some of the work the clinic has been doing supporting registrants facing referrals or disciplinary action. She will also outline how you can get in touch if facing any issues yourself. This is an open webinar and the chat function is live. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, and I and my colleagues will endeavour to answer as we go along. There will be a Q&A at the end, and attendees can raise their hand and unmute to put their questions to our panelists. So let's hear from Fatimah now and understand the troubles she has faced. So Fatimah, thank you for joining us. Could you start with providing the viewers a little bit of background about yourself, your career, and take us back right to the beginning when your issues first started?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. So my name is Fatma. I am a midwife and a mother and a Muslim. That's how I always introduce myself. I used to work at Chelsea and Westminster NHS Trust, NHS Foundation Trust, as a cultural safety lead midwife. So that was a role specifically to tackle systemic inequality and systemic racism within maternity care, because of the Embrace reports showing that there is a significant increase in risk for Black and brown women to pass away as a consequence of pregnancy and childbirth in comparison to their white counterparts. I was doing that, and part of the role was to perform unconscious bias training and make the unit more safer for people to be themselves, by making staff aware of the power that they have and also the power that they have to cause harm to others. And then October the 7th happened, and I did not feel that I could not speak. And there was always a climate of silence that I'd felt for a long time, and it was quite, there's kind of like a blanket of unspoken threat that if you speak up for Palestinians, you are automatically an anti-Semite. But also, if you speak out against Israel, you're also an anti-Semite. I just wasn't really having that. And I tweeted support for Palestinian resistance against their occupation and for our right to support that resistance. And I linked that with I linked that resistance against oppression with self-respect. And that came from my own personal experiences. I'm not Palestinian, I'm half Egyptian, half Bengali. That's the simple version of it. I have a grandparent from all over the world. But from my own personal experiences, I know very intimately the connection between standing up for yourself, not tolerating abuse, and self-respect. The very next day, a Jewish midwife outside of the trust complained to the trust, I believe the executive team, and connected my tweets to an impression of inflammatory speech and inciting violence and anti-Semitism. And the executive team, to my understanding, panicked pretty much. And I was called into a meeting shortly after, very soon, and told to delete my tweets, all my tweets from October the 7th, not tweet politically on my own Twitter account. And I'm laughing because I still find it incredulous. And also open up a new Twitter account, which is anonymous, where I would be free to opine. And I still find it very, very offensive. But I said no, and I said I'd like you to explain precisely where I have been anti-Semitic or inflammatory or supportive of terrorism. The trust were very, very frightened about disreputing their image or affecting their image. But the thing is, they continuously do things to damage their image and their reputation. So it's all not very wise actions. Um, Sure. Unfortunately, the Daily Mail were going to write an article about me following that. And it was very, very frightening. However, they chose not to. And I still don't know why, but I understand that these are editorial decisions, and I still don't know why they didn't, but I'm very grateful that they didn't.
Were
But
you
in the
contacted?
aftermath,
Sorry, you had a
sorry?
prior warning. Were you contacted by the Daily Mail?
I
How
was
did
not
you?
contacted by the Daily
Okay.
Mail. Only the trust was contacted by
Oh,
the
okay.
Daily Mail, and then they informed me. And this all happened within days of each other. It was very fast paced, and it was very, very frightening. But fortunately, they didn't. And in the aftermath, the trust dropped their demands, but they made it very difficult for me to do my job in advocating for justice and against racism. So I felt a duty in my role to speak up against what we were seeing, which was just 1,000 people being killed every single day, hospitals being bombed, psychological batterment, women having to have cesarean sections without pain relief. Just on on a professional role as a midwife, there's something incredibly personal to watch. Other women being subjected to horrendous, horrendous treatment. Um, so the trust did everything they could to impede me. So I was not allowed to host a Palestinian midwife on a webinar, and only to talk about being trained as a midwife under blockade in Gaza. I was not allowed to publish a newsletter article talking about the damage that hospitals in Gaza and the healthcare system in Gaza had sustained as a result of Israeli bombardment. And I wasn't allowed to, well, I say I wasn't allowed. That is the crux of the matter. But they will say, "Oh, we didn't think it was appropriate that you would report the death toll every day because it was affecting other people's psychological well-being." But ultimately, it was also a form of silencing. Um, Shortly afterwards, on a single day, one single day, three complaints came in against me, saying the usual stuff, anti-Semitism, supportive of terrorism, all that. But they were really incoherent. Like there was not much intelligence behind it, I have to say. But the trust still took it seriously. And the climate was that if more came, I was going to be investigated. Um, a few weeks later, or like not even, I think, no, a few weeks later, I was informed, but very shortly after those complaints, UK Lawyers for Israel contacted the trust and said the usual stuff, and pretty much wished for me to be dismissed, saying that I was not safe for Jewish women. The I Because it was like a historical issue. I wasn't investigated then, but I knew it was just a matter of time, and I knew that the trust were getting very antsy about me, and I was the sort of troublesome one. Um, and I took time off. I went off sick because I had two small kids. I still have two small kids, but my youngest at the time was a baby. Watching a genocide in full bloom and not being stopped. It was very difficult because I'm used to watching Gaza being bombed every few years, but this was definitely different, and it was really, really difficult to. I mean, it's not about me, and my pain is secondary compared to those who are actually harmed, but there is a real spiritual toll to watching the most atrocious things happening to others, especially as a midwife and as a mother. Um, so I took time off sick and I came back and I was like, I don't feel safe in this role. And I'm really disappointed that my Palestinian advocacy has not been supported when supporting Palestinian advocacy would be supporting health, which is an NHS value. Um, so I resigned and I had no work to fall back on. Um, and it took me a couple months to find new work. But we did. Alhamdulillah, Allah really, really supported me. And I thought that would be the end of the matter. However, the NMC referrals came through. So 9 months after, about, yeah, 9 months after the UK Lawyers for Israel letter, I don't know if they're connected, but that's my suspicion. I received a letter from I received an email from the Nursing and Midwifery Council saying that they made a decision about my case. And I was like, what case? I hadn't been informed. And it was a very, very frightening night. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to open this email now. I'm going to sleep. Obviously, I didn't sleep, but I opened it in the morning and it said that a complaint had been made about my social media posts about anti-Semitism, etc., saying that I was anti-Semitic, and they said that I did not meet the criteria for their seriousness for it to be investigated further, and they'd closed it. And essentially, it said that registrants have a right to express their opinion. So that was an interesting experience, and I think the more that I've been attempted to be silenced, the more vociferous I've been in my voice, and the more loud I've been in my voice. It's interesting, the attempt to silence, because it just makes you louder. And in January, I critiqued an article written by two midwives that I understand to be Zionists, and it was a lot. There was a lot of weaponization of trauma and subtle demonization of the protests for Palestine that we've been witnessing on the weekends, but also a minimization of the utter atrocious acts that Israel have been conducting against the Palestinians, not just in this current genocide, but like throughout the whole of their occupation, which is decades long. And I critiqued it publicly, and I connected it, saying that I critiqued the article, but I also critiqued Zionism and Zionists, and I critiqued against Zionists being platformed, which some of the authors of that article were being platformed at a conference a few weeks later in London. A week after I made that critique, I received my second NMC referral, which was really, really awful, because I read the email just before I had to do the school run, and I cannot stress how difficult it was to put one foot in front of the other and go and collect my kids, who are not the best listeners to their parents. So it was, it was a point where I was like about to break into tears, like at the school gates. Fortunately, I didn't. 3 weeks later, the NMC had closed the case, saying that, like, I have a right to express an opinion, but because the first and second NMC referrals were made anonymously, I wasn't entitled to know what social media posts were of contention. I wasn't even allowed to know what the content of the complaint was. When I put in a Freedom of Information request, I only got back the emails that I sent them, pretty much, and an email that they sent my former employer asking if they had received any complaints. The NMC did everything they could to protect racists, in my opinion. 11 days after the closure of the NMC referral, the UK Lawyers for Israel sent their second letter against me to Chelsea and Westminster, believing that I still worked there, saying the usual stuff, but also saying that I was, a terrorist sympathizer, supporter, that I was a bully and a harasser because they connected my advocacy against Zionism and Palestinians to that, and that I should face disciplinary action, and that I was a threat. And the letter was really vacuous, and sinister in its well-formed sentences to direct intimidation. It was a really awful letter to read when I did finally manage to get hold of it. The trust, rather than say, and which I really think was the easiest route, rather than just say she doesn't work here, because I hadn't worked there for a year by that point. The trust said that they will deal with this within their own internal processes, even though I didn't work for them. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's just a very clear act of hatred. Because the easiest thing for them to do was to have said that I just didn't work there anymore. Case closed.
Yeah.
But what they did was
Can I
they,
just,
yeah.
sorry, can I just pause you for a moment, just for clarity then? So, we've heard multiple referrals from UKLFI. The initial one where you went off sick and then resigned, did
Hmm.
that did that pause any investigation that was taking place, or did that end it, so to speak?
There wasn't any
There's no
investigations
formal
taking place
investigation.
at that point because the argument was that this is a historical issue. Complaints had already been made. So
Okay.
it's like double jeopardy, which is not
Mm,
fair, which is,
sure.
so, I managed, Allah supported me, Allah helped me, but I managed to escape it. But I knew that it was a matter of time because the, uh, chief people officer said that if more complaints came through, which seemed kind of inevitable, that I would be investigated. So
And
it,
just for the viewers, what were the
mm,
nature of the tweets? Was it simply just critiquing the Israeli actions
uh,
and retweets or reposts or a
yes.
lot all
So
around?
the complaints all contained that the original tweet, the tweet of sin, of supporting Palestinian resistance against illegal occupation. It was a retweet from Jackie Walker, and but also complained about tweets that I'd made about having empathy for Palestinians who are suffering and saying that she's not safe for Jewish people because she's not also showing empathy for the hostages. There's always been this drive to make my empathy for Palestinians flawed in some way. And also instate this idea that you need to have permission before you can actually empathize with Palestinians. So yeah, it was a different letter to the second one, which was much more
Sure.
sinister.
And in
Yeah.
terms of the first one, there was no actual social media policy in place, or did they bring up anything at these discussions?
What, the trust social media
Yeah,
policy?
the
Like
trust,
the
the
trust
original
has a
complaint.
social media policy, but I hadn't violated
Mm,
it.
okay.
They shared it with me again, but I'm just like I've not done anything wrong, and I'm entitled to do this on my
Sure.
own social media platform that I've had since 10 years before I joined you guys. So it's a bit, yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, fortunately I managed to escape any investigations by the trust, but I left because I knew that it was inevitable, it was coming, it was on the horizon. But it seems that even leaving the trust, it's not enough to actually escape disciplinary processes in some way. So after the second NMC referral, a couple weeks later, sorry, after the second UKLFI letter, a few weeks later, the trust referred me to the NMC. Um, and there was nothing original about it in comparison to the other two uh, referrals. 6 days later, the NMC closed the case, and it was an interesting letter because it was different to the others, and it said that, registrants have a right to express an opinion. Fatima's not said anything that's not within lawful margins. Um, and criticism of a political ideology is not the same as discrimination against an ethnic population or group of people. So that I think was the strongest letter, but it still framed me as having somewhat strong opinions. But I don't understand how you can't have strong opinions about a strong genocide. Um, but the third NMC referral was not enough. And the trust, 5 days after they made the NMC referral, referred me to Prevent, which I still am quite flabbergasted over. So 2 months after that referral had been made, I was contacted by the police in an email. And at first I thought it was a hoax because I've never been contacted by the police before in my life. And but it was legitimate. And the content of the email said that a referral had been made that may concern me, and they would like to speak to me about it. And they gave me their contact details to speak to. And I was incredibly frightened. I think any Muslim receiving any contact from Prevent is really, really, really challenging. And if anyone's read the book by Suhaima Manzoor Khan called Tangled in Terror, you understand just how sinister the prevent is because they can detain you for years without charge for non-violent offences. Just simply searching information online about terrorism can get you detained, and there is a very marked targeting towards Muslims. And the history behind it is copious and racist. Um, so I was really worried about my children. I was really worried that someone at my school, my daughter's school, did something, said something. I don't know. There was nothing for me to anchor my thoughts onto because the email that I received was so vague. I was really worried about my husband, my family. It was so difficult. But I decided to contact the number, and I spoke to the police officer the following day. And it was an interesting conversation because he introduced Prevent like I didn't know what it was, which was bizarre, especially considering all healthcare workers have to do Prevent training. Um, and explained that they had received a referral against me, but by my former employer, by Chelsea Westminster, and that's where I discovered that it had been made 5 days after they made the NMC referral. And Prevent. This is the really interesting thing. The officer explained to me that they felt that it was disproportionate. The very words he used was that they felt that it was a sledgehammer to hit a nut sort of situation. And rather than remain silent about it because they had rights under counterterrorism laws to remain silent about this, I could carry on never knowing that I had been referred. They decided to inform me of it and say, be careful because we think someone is out there trying to get you. And I replied with, I know. And it was the first time I felt that a possible duty of care was actually presented to me, that there was an awareness that I was being harassed and targeted. And it didn't come from the NMC and it didn't come from the
Really
trust. It came from
interesting.
Prevent of all
Mm.
places. And this hasn't softened my impression of Prevent. I still think it's a very sinister program that, really needs regulation. Um, but I'm grateful, and I'm grateful to have been informed because it spurred on my legal case against Chelsea and Westminster for post-employment harassment and discrimination because this is unacceptable. We no one is safe from being in an NHS or even leaving an NHS trust if they can do this. And I think it's really important that the NHS as a whole is made aware that you just can't treat people like this, and there needs to be a statement in support of Palestine and health in Palestine, because this people wouldn't feel emboldened enough to behave this way. And that's my story.
Thank you for going into some detail there, so you can see how it can be could have been quite traumatic
Yeah.
for you. Just a few follow-up questions then. So you mentioned the UKLFI letters, but also you did contact the support clinic at one point, and
Yes.
I think you mentioned that the NMC were refusing to disclose the identity of some of the complainants, and they mentioned there was an anonymous policy. Um, with regards to that, what is there to stop the same complainant? Have you contacted the NMC? Is there anything in the process? Yeah.
Yes, I spoke to a contact at the NMC, one of the deputy chief midwife representatives at the NMC, and I explained my story. And they themselves were also shocked to hear that I was referred to Prevent. And I did tell them that if there wasn't this anonymous policy, then I could have done something about this, and accountability could have been, could have been held, and then it wouldn't have led to a Prevent referral. And the NMC have a duty of care to the registrants, but I think, as long as they act as a superior authority and not act within community with nurses and midwives, that this will always happen. Um, but there is nothing to stop because of the anonymity, the blanket anonymity across any kind of case. And I understand that there are some situations which require anonymity, such as like sexual violence, etc. I think like when it comes to social media posts, around a political issue. I think then there needs to be some kind of barrier for people to not abuse the
Mm.
system of referrals because the NMC will take any referral and take it seriously. So anyone like with Twitter X user 101, if they made a referral, it will be taken seriously. And then they could possibly just make another account and we don't, and then make another referral and we don't know if it's the same person. I did ask if the first two referrals were made
Same individual.
if they were the same
Mm.
person. I was told that they were two independent people, but because they're both anonymous, there is no actual
Mm. I'm
guarantee that
assuming
they
they're,
aren't.
yeah, so I'm assuming they're anonymous even to the regulator, or the
Yes,
regulator's
that
aware of who they are but can't disclose it
I
to
think
yourself.
if they're if I think if they disclose their name and their email address, then it's not anonymous to the regulator, and I think that was the case in the second NMC referral that
Mm.
I received. But if they choose to remain, and if they say this is an anonymous referral, then the NMC will not disclose that to the person who was referred. Um, but they can, but also someone of anonymous name, like just made up name, or can also make a referral from like a made up email address, and
Mm.
the NMC will communicate that with them. But there is no guarantee that it's not
Yeah.
even a person. That it could have been an Autobot, it could be AI for all we know. So
But
it's very frightening.
yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, from personal experience with the GPHC, the pharmaceutical regulator, they don't take seriously any complaints which you don't
That's
disclose your
interesting.
name. So I'm not sure if there's any difference in policy between the regulators, which is a shame. Maybe the NMC need to look at that and address that
The,
potentially.
the NMC really need to change. And I believe they recently, I might be wrong on this, but I think they had a regulatory body assess them recently, and I think they failed at
Mm.
it. And their
Standards
culture
authority.
review is still undergoing because I think last year it was noted that there is systemic bullying and racism within the NMC
Mm.
itself. So how are the registrants safe? How can they regulate us? But I'm hopeful for things to change. I have to be. We have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of actually handling the complaints, though, compared to the GMC, we've had a comment come through that the GMC don't even notify you if a complaint doesn't reach thresholds of an actual,
Oh,
um, like passing the test of being taken forward. So to give the NMC some credit there, they notified you that there was a complaint and they didn't take it further, I suppose,
they
and they gave those
notified me in
reasonings.
one of the cases.
Just one
In
of
the other
the,
two
so they're
cases,
learning
they
slowly.
didn't even let me know.
Yeah,
And I think that was an administrative incompetence. I think
sure,
they only have about 14 people working
really.
around these issues. Yeah. And they have 400,000 nurses on the register. I don't know how many midwives they have. And I believe they have like about 600 referrals every month,
Yeah. Oh,
which is
wow.
frightening to think of.
Potentially the team cannot cope with
Yeah.
those. Yeah. You mentioned how each complaint emboldened you to stand firm and your obviously support against the genocide. And you mentioned also you had a young family, and I think you're pregnant now. Congratulations for that.
Yes,
So
thank you.
how did the whole process affect your mental health, and what help is there for other nurses and midwives who go through the same situation?
The mental health was really, really, it was a real toll, and it impacted my family. And women are historically the glue of the family, so I felt like the family was really kind of not falling apart, but it was very impacted. But I'm fortunate to have a good support network, a really supportive husband, and I mean there is access to like my workplace has mental health support support, and like most NHS trusts have access to clinical psychology for their staff. The NMC would at the end of every letter had this is links for support, etc., etc. But
Fantastic.
it doesn't feel authentic because you know that they're doing this
Like a
in order to
generic
cover
signposting, is it?
themselves,
Yeah,
because six nurses who were waiting for screening for their referrals actually ended up committing suicide
Yeah.
because they had been waiting for ages,
Mm.
sometimes years, and oftentimes, and then they've been suspended from their workplaces. And many of these are Black and brown nurses, those who are internationally recruited. There's the sentiment is amongst registrants that the NMC does not care about nurses and midwives.
Mm.
And since that, they've been trying to look like they care more about mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you're taking a new case forward is it against the trust? Could you go through, just for the viewers, exactly what the case is, what support
Yeah.
you need as well?
So I've been fortunate enough to get legal aid from Lead and we've put in a claim in to the Employment Tribunal against Chelsea and Westminster NHS Foundation Trust for post-employment harassment and discrimination. Turns out my case is the first where someone has tried to enact uh, um, consequences or harassment, well, like a referral and an MC referral and a prevent referral after somebody's left the trust, left the workplace. Usually, when it comes to post-employment harassment, it's they didn't write me a reference and that sort of thing. It's never actually this level of unsafe behavior. We're putting it in as a because of the David Miller case, the ability to express anti-Zionist belief is a protected right at the moment. So we're putting through a discriminatory case against the trust based on that, but also based on being a supporter of Palestinian advocacy. But I will always say a supporter of justice, because it's not just about Palestine; it's about anyone in the world that faces oppression and colonialism, such as Sudan and Congo, and but also because we're not making it specifically because I am Muslim, but there is a sinisterness about being referred to prevent, especially as I'm Muslim, and I think I think anyone that refers a Muslim to prevent is aware of the rates of referrals of Muslims to prevent. So I think there is something sinister there. Yeah. So at the moment, we have received a response to the letter informing the trust that we've taken a claim to the Employment Tribunal. We're waiting for them to refer to the particulars of the claim. And yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but essentially what the trust is doing is trying to argue that the case shouldn't take off the ground, and based on some really archaic law. So it's just another hurdle, but for us, but it shows that the trust are trying to hide something. The fact that they didn't comment to the press shows that they knew there was nothing good for them to say, and that that their reputation is really down in the dumps. And but I think the best thing is to take accountability, and do better because I don't want the trust to just dissipate, and therefore for healthcare to not be available for the people that attend.
Mm.
I want things to change, and I want there to be accountability so that we are protected. Because if there is no accountability, this just keeps happening over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
definitely true. And we've put a link to the crowdfunding in the comments below. So where are you in the process of the case? How far in the journey are
We
you?
are
Is it
going
still
to
early
have a
stages?
prelim. So we're waiting to hear back from Chelsea, about the particulars of claim, and then we can respond.
Mm.
But we also have a preliminary hearing. However, the date of it is on the 2nd of September, which is just it feels ages away. But
Mm.
we're going to try and see if we can bring that forward because the trust will be happy for this to drag on and on and on because of the psychological toll it will take on me.
Okay, no, I can
Yeah.
imagine. Okay, we'll take a bit of a pause there. So we're just going to bring in Saira now, and then before we finish, we'll open it up to the floor. Some questions for Fatimah. So, welcome, Saira. Lovely to have you with us. I believe you have a presentation for us. So, if you can just share that on the screen.
And unmute myself there and just share this right now. For this. So I got this. What's that one? Okay, can you see that there? Am I blocking it at all? Okay. Okay. So thank you, Fatima, for sharing your story here today and providing a first-hand account of difficulties our healthcare providers are facing. You've been able to give us great insight into your experience, which mirrors some of the clients we support in our clinic. I manage the operational side of our clinic with our director, Shahan. And at our clinic, we work alongside a dedicated team of highly experienced and well-established clinicians who bring a wealth of expertise from across the healthcare sector. Their insight, guidance, and professional judgment are invaluable in helping us navigate complex cases, offering informed opinions on clinical matters and supporting a balanced, practical approach to the investigations we handle. One such example we had is where the unfortunate tragedy of Tabia Khan, a medical student, following her passing, BIMA increased their outreach efforts to ensure it was widely known that support existed for those vulnerable students. This led to us being reached out to further by students. And an example of our clinicians helping was when a medical student was facing termination. They received numerous hours dedicated to providing emotional support, as well as being able to prepare them for their hearing preparations, which in turn resulted in the change of decision and them being allowed to resit their OSCE. So our BIMA Support Clinic was primarily established to assist healthcare professionals and allies facing workplace investigations, repercussions connected to their Muslim identity or their advocacy for such causes like Palestine, as well as standing against Islamophobia. This has become a pressing concern as more healthcare professionals face sustained challenges and threats to their livelihoods. The number of allegations and accusations against those facing such threats is on the rise, and we are finding our community increasingly facing incidences of discrimination, hostility, and risk within the workplace. This has created a demand for safe, confidential, and trusted support. Our aim is to provide clear guidance, reassurance, and pathways to navigate these challenges. We are committed to providing hands-on guidance during investigations and fostering peer support, empowering healthcare professionals with the knowledge of their rights when subject to these allegations, delivering resources such as the Expressing Solidarity with Palestine document, as well as our HCP's resources and guidelines. Additionally, we refer clients to organizations, law firms, freelance consultancies, and an informal legal advisor. They are equipped and capable of addressing and challenging the injustices that our clients experience. Although presently we aim to support those clients who are facing a component of discrimination or Islamophobia, the scope of our client base currently extends to anyone who needs support whilst we have capacity. Let me just change the slide. Our cases range from those being reported to the GMC, NMC, facing investigations, false accusations, FTP hearings, to those who are facing Islamophobia and discrimination. Many cases can require legal signposting to firms that have capacity to support these more extreme allegations, and others we are able to help guide and navigate. A couple of examples where we've supported clients and cases outside of these are, for example, we had one BIMA member who felt they were the recipient of racism and Islamophobia during an A&E visit they had. They reached out to us to try to gain some support, and BIMA was able to draft a supporting letter to assist and strengthen their complaint. We had another recent case where a couple of GP partners that simply wanted an unbiased opinion on action taken following an investigation within their practice. They reached out to us simply to just get an organization they trusted. They wanted our feedback. We deliberated with our clinicians, and we were able to formulate a response that they were deeply grateful and appreciative of. Another case we had was very unfortunate, where a client had their full day of international psychiatry, including a consultant delivering from the grounds of Gaza, completely cancelled from their TPDs. And they were very distraught, very upset. And they contacted BIMA, and we were, alhamdulillah, able to offer guidance and support and help prepare them for their meeting with their TPDs, as well as offering psychological support to them. Though many of our clients require legal support and guidance throughout their process, we have clients that are extremely vulnerable, and facing these challenges necessitates the need for pastoral or psychological support. As Fatima was just saying, it's awful to hear that 6 nurses committed suicide whilst waiting for their referrals. That's an absolute travesty. And they can take a lengthy amount of time. And our clients are in desperate need. And through collaborations, BIMA has been able to create direct referrals where urgent support is requested, and there simply isn't time for those to wait. And I literally mean within the week, we're able to get some support connected for them. Within a few days, the referral can be created and they can be reached out to. For some of our clients, there simply is no warning, and there is no time to process. They are met with challenges that they have almost no way to prepare for, and it could happen to any one of us anytime. All these allegations, Islamophobia, workplace discrimination, or repercussions for supporting Palestine has become part of our reality, and we need a system in place for when this transpires. The frustration, anger, and emotional strain our community feels are completely justified and deeply felt. Our hope is to continue to expand our legal network and maintain the capacity to support everyone who turns to us. Thank you very much for listening.
No, thank you, Saira, and thank you for all the hard work you've been doing with the clinic. I think everyone would agree it's very powerful hearing some of those stories, especially the suicides. I know, especially the younger, more junior members of the medical profession, they do feel as though there are those power differentials, and sometimes suffering alone is the biggest crime of all, and having that support out
Absolutely.
there is really beneficial. So thank you for all that work, and hopefully we can see less of those types of cases where people feel on their own. Just going back to Fatima now, we're just going to go through a few questions that have come through. So a number of questions on a similar topic. So when did you feel the need to reach out for legal advice? I know obviously you're bombarded with repeated referrals. When did you feel it came to that point that you needed to seek legal advice?
I think the first time was after the second NMC referral, where I was fortunate to be put into contact with yourself, Shahan. And that was really helpful because even though we're not taking a legal case against the NMC or anything, it was really it was really empowering to know that there was support for me, that I wasn't by myself. And that was really helpful and just helped getting through the ordeal of the referral and just waiting for a decision to be made. Um, but after the third NMC referral, I was like, that's it. That 3 times, this has to stop. I can't just accept this as a feature of my
Mm.
career. No one should. And I contacted I contacted people in Healthcare Workers for Palestine who put me in touch with solicitors, and we had a discussion. And I remember my solicitor first telling me, "This is a bit weird. This is a bit bizarre. You've left them. Why are they referring you?" And I was like, "Somebody really hates me."
Mm.
So I was at that point, and then we found out literally about 6 weeks later about the prevent referral, which has strengthened my case. And yeah, it appears I have a good case, which is something because the Employment Tribunal is not a space that understands white supremacy or racism, and the legal courts are not really it's not the best place for justice. I think justice actually comes from public opinion, and the court of public opinion. So, considering all of those factors, the fact that I am predicted to have a good case is very promising.
And I know Lee Day is quite instrumental in taking on these types of cases. And what are their thoughts in terms of the trends, people approaching them? Are they
There,
seeing it change?
there's Lide are also undertaking Nadeem Crow's case
Mm.
with the Royal Free, and there's 3 healthcare workers. One of them includes Ahmed Baker, who is a Palestinian
Yeah,
nurse.
or the
I think it's with the Barts
arts,
Trust.
that's the uniform policy, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
they were the ones who were told to remove their watermelon background
Mm.
from,
Yeah.
which is just ridiculous. It's absolutely
Mm.
ridiculous. So it's setting a precedent to protect Palestinian advocacy
Mm.
as non-anti-Semitic. So there's been a collection. There's been minor issue, more minor incidents that I've heard of, who Lead also supported, that's been dealt with a bit more quietly. But ever since I've gone public with my case, I've had quite a lot of people tell me I've been referred to I've
Yeah.
been reported to the GMC, I've been referred to the NMC, and it's devastating that it's just so easy to do, and cause so much harm and
Mm.
damage, and stress is a real killer. It's a real killer.
Yeah, and I suppose
And
without the freedom of information requests, we won't really know how many people just close their accounts and just stop
yeah,
advocating for Palestine. We don't know how many cases there are out there unless we
yeah.
contact them. That's the
The
thing.
intimidation is rife, and it
Mm.
really does frighten a lot of people from continuing to be advocates for Palestine. But also, there's been midwives are already leaving the NMC. They're already leaving their jobs because it's already hard enough. If the NMC continue to make things hard for people to even stay on the register, it's going to seriously impact the service that we give in the NHS. It just has
Mm.
to change. It cannot continue like this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a question for you, Saira. So, what's the financial model for BIMA support? You mentioned you're looking to expand your legal network. How does the process work thus far?
Oh, so with our clients that reach out to us, they can reach out to us through BIMA, or they can contact us through our email directly, which is support. I've got it, support at British IMA, or they have a phone number they can reach us, which is 0203 551 2497. And they can contact us either way. And there are no expenses at the moment for our clients that reach out to us. It's a completely free service for them. And when signposting, that would only be the point in time where they could make the decision if they wanted to pay for those services.
Sure. And in terms of your time at the clinic, do you see any trends? Is it getting any worse, the number of referrals, or
I
would you
do think
say?
at the moment, definitely there is an increase and there is a rise in number. There is a lot of support that's needed. And we are a non-profit organization. We do require funding. We do require funding for the clinic to exist, for that support to be in place. We have referrals where it's simply just an urgent request for dire need for mental health. And those are healthcare professionals. Those are the colleagues. And it's dealing with the trauma, as Fatima mentioned, the emotional toll it's taken on her. And there needs to be that support system in place, because when you're faced with these investigations and these accusations, where are you going to go to? There needs to be a system in place. And at the moment, we're doing our best at BIMA to provide that system for them. But unfortunately, it is a service that is going to require funding to keep operating and to exist for everybody. That's just the nature of the organization, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just going back to Fatima, so I know you're with Lee Day. I know we have good contacts with Ram and Lowe, who have also taken on a number of high-profile cases. And from what he's mentioned to me, the case law in this area is changing. Obviously, there's that previous conflation of legitimate anti-Israeli or anti-Zionist Israeli policy criticism, which should be legitimate, versus and being conflated with anti-Semitism. And obviously, you mentioned the Miller case within your presentation. So, in terms of your discussions with Lee Day, do you see the landscape changing? Is it being a bit easier to speak up, or would you say, especially with those uniform policies, it's going the other way and people are being more censored?
I think I don't know if it's it's never easy to speak up for justice, in any case, and there will always be risk, because laws and rights have never been handed to us benevolently. They've always had to be fought for. However, one thing I have noticed is that more people are standing up against being discriminated against, or or disciplined for speaking up for justice. And I think since the images of the famine has changed public opinion a little towards Palestine, in the UK anyway. The rest of the world are all for Palestine. We have to remember that. It feels sometimes quite isolating and desolate to think that no one cares, but there is a lot of support for Palestine. It's just that because we're in the UK, and we're meant to perceive Israel as some kind of ally and not some kind of rogue state. Um, there is that veiled, unspoken threat that you just can't say anything against Israel. And
Yeah,
it has been the attempt of the Zionist lobby to conflate Judaism with Zionism, and they've done it very well, I have to say. They've been very organized in their approach. Um, but one thing I've noticed is that I think since maybe March 2025, there's been more people speaking up against being discriminated against. And I think that's emboldened people, but there is still a lot of fear because careers are at risk and people have lost their careers. And when this genocide is labeled as a genocide and inshallah people are put in The Hague, those people will not get their jobs back. They will not get, compensation. But at the same time, I do think like, what are you living for if you don't live for your values? And Allah will judge you at the end, if you didn't do what you could do. So yeah, I think, and you have to recognize what your privileges are. I'm well educated and well supported and well loved. Like, I have a duty
Mm.
to take on those sacrifices. It's not like I am, a domestic worker and I'm earning minimum wage and I have, a family. I'm a single mom. It's not like that. So,
Yeah.
um, the responsibilities vary depending on what power you have.
No, no, thank you. So just talking to our members as well, I think people are emboldened by people like yourself and other high profile cases currently going forward, speaking up, continuing to speak up. And I think people feel a bit more empowered to speak up. Would you say the situation, obviously we're in a ceasefire. They're hoping to have this temporary ceasefire, if it is temporary or
Allah.
is long term. Do you think the landscape of speaking up will change? Would you still see players such as UKLFI and those still stay on the attack?
I
Um,
think it's going to take a long time for UKLFI to be perceived as, you know, I want to say a rude word, but I won't. For them to be perceived as, just simply bad lawyers. They're just really not. They're just
mm,
not good at what they do. Like they were reached for comment when I did when my case became public in the press, and they compromised themselves in their comments. So it was all a bit very odd. I'm like, I can't believe this is a group of lawyers. I'm hoping that with my case and others, the NHS, the NMC, the GMC will at least apply caution rather than this blind belief and trust in UKLFI. But ultimately, they have a lot of money behind them. They have a lot of support behind them from high places, not in a majority sense of public opinion. I think the public hate them really. But so it'll take time, and I think when the ICJ label it as a genocide, there will be a lot more caution in people supporting UKLFI and Israel and Zionism. And I think Zionists will be a bit more, they will feel what we've felt and feel like they have to double check what they're about to say,
sure.
inshallah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've gone through all the questions in the chat. So we'll open it up to the floor. Naomi, if anyone wants to raise their hand or turn their camera on, if we've got a question. Just wait for that. Naomi, can you hear us?
Yeah, if anyone wants to raise their hands or just type in the chat, I can unmute you.
Yeah, just while we're waiting for that, I suppose also I know recent events in terms of the government making statements, uh, overriding the regulators as well. So that has been particularly worrying. I don't know if you have any thoughts
Yes.
on that.
I think it's incredibly concerning. Regulators should work in community with the registrants. They should not be the lapdog of the government. It's
Mm,
very dangerous and it will impact health. It will, and you need a society that is healthy and has access to health. Otherwise, unfortunately, the economy, which all the government really care about, will decline. It just will decline. You need, it's not good for capitalism for people to just be unhealthy and sick. So like, and the NHS is already on its knees. It's been on its knees for decades.
Yeah.
So it's it really hands off. West Streeting needs to get hands off the GMC. It's not, and also it's quite frightening that these decisions can be made at the beck of one MP, and not like not a council, and not after like rigorous debate and democratic processes. That this it feels quite authoritarian.
Yeah, so one of the cornerstones of our democracy is that independence needs to, the legislator should be independent from the rule makers, the people who are enforcing the rules in the tribunals. So the GMC in particular, or the MPTS, needs to have independence from any
Mm.
political pressure. So definitely, and I think BIMA are writing to Wes Streeting regarding that issue. I can't see any more questions coming in. So there is a recording that will be put on YouTube, so you can contact us after if you have any pending questions. But we thank our guests and everyone today who's attended, and we do hope it was a useful insight into the regulatory process and the troubles that Fatima's personally faced. We do hope you can support her campaign, and the link to her crowd justice is in the chat, and we'll disseminate that within our networks after. So we wish Fatima the very best in her case. We'd also like to thank Saira for providing an insight into some of the work BIMA Support Clinic is doing, and please do get in touch if you are facing any issues. Again, the support email will be in the chat and given after as well. We do hope to be running some further BIMA webinars in the near future. We have actually reached out to Ram and Lowe again, inviting them back on to provide a legal update with some of the more recent cases that are within the public arena. So again, please keep an eye out on the comms, and we hope to see you all then. But it's a goodbye for all of us for now. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.